Hello and welcome to Merlin's Manor. Today I'm going over the board games I played for the first time in the month of April and giving some first impressions reviews. Now I had a slow month when it came to new games. I only had 12 plays across 5 games. And keep in mind that I had a very limited amount of plays for these games, so the ratings I'll be giving these games are super tentative and subject to change after more plays. Let's jump right on into the first one, and that is Lost Cities Roll and Write, which I played 3 times, and I'm giving it a 7 out of 10. Unlike the card game, this version plays up to 4 players, but all of my players were at the 2-player count. It has a similar feel to Lost Cities, the card game, except you are using dice instead of cards, which makes the game more random. One player will roll 3 number dice and 3 color dice, and then gets first choice of a color and number combination that all the rest of the players get to choose from the other dice, regardless of player count, and they can use the same dice. Just like in Lost Cities, the card game, you want to start out with low numbers, because the numbers you add into the various colors must be equal to or higher than the previous number. You also can use the number 0 to double your score for a color if you put that in first before you add any other numbers. But keep in mind, when you start an expedition, you'll be scoring negative points. Now, if you cannot or choose not to take a dice combo, you instead scratch off a space in the right column. And as you go up that column, you'll also score more points unless you get to the very top and bust. And then you'll get 0 points for that column. So you don't want to refuse dice too much. Now, there are bonus spots on the tracks that either let you enter a number on a track that is the same as the previous number, or you can collect a pottery with some of the icons there, which is another track for scoring points. Each track has a race to a certain spot to get a 20-point bonus, which provides quite the level of competition throughout the game, trying to race up those tracks before your opponents. The game end triggers either once all bonus spots have been claimed or all players have busted by refusing too many dice. This game is fun with quite a bit of pushing your luck throughout the game. Do you take that high number now, knowing it will limit your options later, or refuse the dice, knowing if you do that too much, you're going to exhaust and lose points on that track? Also, do you start another track midway or even late in the game, rather than refuse dice, or using a higher number you'd want to on another track? There's a much higher degree of uncertainty as to what you will be able to pull off in this game, as you never know what's going to be rolled. Whereas in the card game, you can have some idea of the cards that might still come out, but this also means you have higher hopes of number and color combinations showing up, because a combo is never gone from the game. The scoring is a little different than the card game in that there are scores next to each level of the expedition, starting with -40 and going up to 50. Rather than adding up the numbers and subtracting 20 from that, as in the card game. Overall, this is a light, quick filler game that provides a similar feel to the card game in some aspects, but more randomness and a few extra things to focus on rather than just scoring the expeditions. Just like the other versions of Lost Cities, I give it a 7 out of 10, and I feel like it provides its own unique take on the Lost Cities system. Now let's get into the next game, and that is Jurassic World: Legacy of Nublar. And I played this 3 times. We played the tutorial mission at 2 players, and then we played missions 1 and 2 at the 3-player count. And I'm giving it a 7 out of 10 so far. Keep in mind, we've only played 2 missions out of the 12-game campaign, plus the tutorial mission. And so there's plenty more to unlock and explore with this game. This is a cooperative campaign game that gives off a similar vibe to Horrified in its gameplay, except with less pickup and delivery, but with a bit more going on in other ways as you try to avoid the carnivorous dinosaurs and hope that they don't kill other dinosaurs. Some of the components are really nice. I like the amber dye and the dino minis and the little amber tokens with mosquitoes in them, while others are pretty basic. The gameplay offers some basic challenges to complete, but with a harsh 5-round time limit, so you have to be very efficient. You also have to be careful not to get too many crisis tokens flipped, which happens from things like not completing the challenges quickly enough or dinosaurs getting killed. Each round consists of 9 actions split among the players, with players getting equal amount of turns when possible, and then deciding who gets the leftover turns. There are some mini puzzles to complete in buildings and objectives that all must be completed before the end of the game. I think the game would work a little better if you could let someone else take your action points, because we found sometimes a player wound up being able to do nothing on their turn while others had to get into position and start working on a task. I'm also not sure if I like the idea of the randomized crisis tokens instead of just getting, say, 1 point per crisis. You never really know if you could only afford to take 2 hits or 4 hits. I don't think the game benefits from this particular randomness. We are so far enjoying this game, but I do not think it's worth the full asking price of $120, and I'm glad that I got it at a discounted rate. It is worth what I paid for and probably a little bit more than that, so I'm satisfied with the purchase, but I cannot recommend this game at full or even close to full MSRP. My rating of 7 out of 10 is a rating for the game in general, separate from a consideration of the price. If you find this game on a steep discount, I recommend giving it a try if you like the action point system and puzzle solving found in Horrified, and if the dinosaur theme appeals to you. The next one that I want to talk about is Splendor Duel. I played it 3 times. I'm giving it an 8 out of 10. Now, I enjoy classic Splendor, but I enjoy this version even more. Just like in regular Splendor, you are collecting gems represented by chips to pay for cards, and as you buy cards, you are getting permanent gems that you can use for future purchases. Some of the basic cards are cheap to buy, but don't give you points. The more expensive cards are going to require you to have bought cards in order to be able to afford to buy them. This version has changed up the way that you attract nobles to the collection of crowns. And when you collect 3 crowns, you'll choose one of the 4 nobles, and then when you collect 6 crowns, you'll select another one. The game also adds elements of a head-to-head nature that work really well, which adds some push and pull to the game that would not work in a 3 or more player game. You select chips from a board in the middle where you can take up to 3 chips that are in a row, and when the board starts getting low, you can take a free action to refill the board from the bag of used chips. But if you do, then your opponent gets a scroll which allows them to get an extra chip from the board as a free action before their turn. Now, I found in our games we kept trying to find actions we could do in order to avoid giving the other player this benefit, but ultimately the board needed to be refilled by someone, and then you do get first pick of the chips. But the fact that you're giving a benefit to the other player added that great tension to that refill action. There were also some instant benefits on cards, one of which had you steal a chip from another player, something I don't mind as much in a 2-player game, but don't really like when you are being forced to choose between people in a 3 or more player game, so I think it works well for this being a 2-player only game. This game also adds 2 new win conditions. The original Splendor was simply a first to 20 points wins the game, but this one not only has that as a win condition, but also adds the first to gain 10 points in a single color win condition, as well as a first to 10 crowns win condition. I like that there are multiple paths to victory that you can focus on, and if one path looks unlikely for you, then you can switch to an alternate path. You may also want to monitor if the other player is going for one of the alternate paths to victory. I've always enjoyed the engine building aspect of the original Splendor, but I think the head-to-head elements as well as the multiple win conditions give this version an edge over the original, and so I'm giving it an 8 out of 10. The next game I want to talk about is Ieurusalem, Anno Domini. I played it twice, once at the 2-player count and once at 3 players. I'm going to give it a tentative 7 out of 10, maybe leaning towards a 6.5 out of 10. I definitely need to have more plays before I can truly settle on a rating for this one. Now, the point of this game is to get your meeples, who represent followers of Jesus, closer to Jesus and the apostles at the Last Supper in order to score points. You also score points for listening to parables, doing favors, and placing out apostles at the Last Supper table. I want to begin by pointing out this game plays very differently at 2 players than 3 and 4 players. The 2-player game gets rid of the favor track, which has you giving a token to an opponent that gives them a bonus, plus an icon they can use later, which makes sense since doing a favor to your only opponent would make this action less enticing. The 2-player variant adds a friendly follower mechanism, though that really changes the game up as you have to focus less on gaining resources and more on utilizing the friendly followers, and adds a way to score points by grouping friendly followers together. I don't think I appreciated this variation as much as the standard game. It felt a little weird with the way it changed the strategy. Now, getting back to talking about the general gameplay, I like the overall concept of the game with a few different things to focus on: placing followers, doing favors, and listening to parables. You start out with a basic deck of cards that you can buy or earn more powerful cards that are one-time use cards that go straight into your hand. And when playing cards, you choose to place them in one of 3 spots, and it's important how you place them because in order to place an apostle, you need icons on the cards in the right order, and you have limited ways to change that order in the game. So this adds some tension between playing cards for the right symbol in the moment versus the action you want to take in the moment. I also like that you get different benefits from placing out the various apostles. Now you have a limited storage area that you need to clear followers out of in order to store more resources, so you can spend resources in order to place followers at the supper. The game also adds some tension with a decision each time you place a follower at the supper as to whether you want to take a 1-point blessing, which will take up a space in your storage area that you cannot discard later if you decide you need more storage space. And so you have to make that decision, do I want to take that point now or have more room for storage space? Now let's talk about what I don't like. I don't like the favor system where you have to choose a player to benefit, which is always going to leave someone else upset that you didn't grant them the benefit. And if others don't choose to give you a benefit as much, it kind of leaves you feeling disadvantaged there. I'm never really a fan of having to choose an opponent to either target with a negative or give a benefit to, because I don't like choosing between the different players, especially when in the moment all options may seem equal. I must admit that this was a thematic element, as a good follower would do a favor to another rather than being selfish and keeping things to themselves, so it works thematically. I just don't like the mechanic itself. I also found the concept of switching places when playing 3 of the apostles a little off theme. Someone could come in and move you away from Jesus, which is worth 7 points, and seat you far away from the table for few points or worse next to Judas for a negative 5 points. Seemed a little bit too much take that for a game that's supposed to be about being the best follower of Jesus you can be. I also was not a fan of Judas being worth negative points. Now, while I get the point of this, I didn't like the idea of placing him out to mess others over very fun, and I certainly did not appreciate when someone placed their person in Judas's row and then swapped places with me, moving me from next to Jesus to being by Judas, a 12-point loss for me. Maybe if Judas was simply not worth any points at all, it would give reason enough to avoid being near him without being overly punishing if you found yourself in his column. One other weird thing was that players were to choose a place to put a follower before player order was established, and with there being a 4th player's color meeples already out in a 3-player game, it left some spots being potentially better than others, albeit only marginally better. And so, of course, everyone is going to want the better spaces there, but with no rules on who gets to choose first, it left things as a free-for-all, and who should get to choose first if you did choose first player before selecting spots. Is it going to be the first player or is it going to be the last player? So, could have used a little adjustment on the rules there. So due to some rather mean take-that elements to this game that I found off-theme, plus having to choose one opponent to give a favor to, I don't find myself as enthusiastic about this game as I hoped I would be. There are definitely elements of the game I enjoy, but I'm not sure how much those elements overcome the negatives for me. I'm currently sitting at a 7 out of 10, potentially leaning towards that 6.5, but I definitely need more plays to decide on a rating for this one. Keep in mind I only played this game twice so far, which even for a game that I don't have mixed feelings about is not enough for me to give a formal rating, and the mixed feelings add to the tentative nature of my rating for this game even more. Finally, I played a game at a friend's house called City of the Living, and I played it once, and I'm giving it a very tentative 7 out of 10. The tentative nature of the rating for this one mainly comes down to the single play, and that there was a lot going on in this game to figure out for rating it after a single play. In this game, you are building up your settlement in order to defend against zombies. Everything you buy will have a push and pull between increasing or decreasing your defense and cooperation. Oftentimes, as you increase one, the other will go down. Cooperation will make getting supplies easier, while defense will control the zombie population at your base. Too little defense and you'll gain more zombies. Plenty of defense and you'll be killing off the zombies that are already surrounding your base. Now the new tiles that come out will trigger an event which will either have like a zombie attack or gaining resources or scouting, which allows you to move up on these different tracks, or scoring points, or checking your cooperation, gaining fuel for good cooperation, or losing fuel or gaining zombies for bad cooperation. I really liked the push and pull when it came to gaining benefits on one track but losing ground in another track, and trying to maximize those things, and priorities shifting during the game depending on what events it already triggered. I did find that multiple events happening between your turns did make it harder to really take advantage of planning around what has already happened, and the fact that multiple things will hit you between turns meant you really needed to work to keep things somewhat balanced, and that would be even greater if we were playing it at 4 players, I believe. Now, the game almost felt too tight at times with the balancing, but that did make it fun. I did find some things somewhat unthematic. One example was that a sniper tower lowered your defense, which seemed like the opposite of what it should do. But that was there to balance the benefits, so gameplay-wise, I see why it was like that, but it just didn't make thematic sense to me, and there were a few other things also that came up like this throughout the game. This game is a re-implementation of a game from 2013 named Prosperity, so some of the shortcomings in thematic tie-ins may be attributed to this reskinning and a greater focus on keeping the tight mechanisms of that original game. The game definitely seems to put gameplay ahead of theme, which is not a bad thing, as gameplay being good is more important to me than the theme perfectly matching. One final minor gripe I have about the game is that I found in one of the graphic designs options. Typically in board games and the world in general, orange and red are colors meaning danger or something bad, and green and blue are typically positive. Yet they decided that adding to defense should be orange and lowering defense should be blue. In the early game, I chose a tile that I thought was going to add both cooperation and defense. I didn't really know better at the time that that wouldn't really be how the game works, only to find out I was hurting my defense due to the blue symbol there. To be fair, the player boards do have the symbology on them to show which was which, but I hadn't looked that closely at that symbology on the board yet, and just expected blue to be a good thing and orange to be a bad thing, when in fact it was the opposite. A very odd and unintuitive graphic design choice to me. Now, I did enjoy my play of City of the Living, but I will need to play it more to really be able to properly rate the game. And so these are the 5 games that I played for the first time in the month of April. I hope you've enjoyed my thoughts on these games that I played for the very first time. Keep in mind that the ratings are very tentative. I hope you'll check out some more of my videos. I've got a couple right here for you. Check those out, and I'll catch you in the next one.